The other night, at a rally in Florida, Trump suggested that there had been a terrorist attack in Sweden, quote, last night, end quote.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
This came as a great shock to the people of Sweden because they had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. The last terrorist attack in Sweden was in 2010 when an Iraqi-born Swede carried out a bomb attack that injured 2 people and killed the bomber. Trump later claimed he was talking about a report on Fox TV featuring clips from Ami Horowitz's, quote, documentary, unquote, that indicated a growing crime rate since Sweden started taking in refugees. The problem, of course, is that according to Reuters, Sweden's crime rate has been steadily dropping since 2005. Because it's fucking Sweden. At this point, they're trying to reduce racist attacks and hate crimes, which seem to be targeted based on brown skin, practicing Islam, and sexual orientation. A while back, Propaganda Minister Conway referenced the, quote, Bowling Green Massacre, end quote, as evidence of the need for Trump's Muslim ban.
I bet there was very little coverage. I bet it's brand new information to people that President Obama had a 6-month ban on the Iraqi refugee program after 2 Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green Massacre. I mean, most people don't know that because it didn't get covered.
As you know, the Bowling Green Massacre didn't get coverage because there was no such massacre. Minister Conway was talking about a pair of Iraqi immigrants who were arrested in Kentucky trying to send money and guns back to Iraq. One is serving a life sentence, the other something like 40 years. Neither appears to have returned to Iraq since arriving in the U.S., nor had actual contact with anyone in ISIL, and neither was charged with plotting an attack in the U.S. Shortly after that, Sean Spicer referred to an attack in Atlanta.
What do we say to the family that loses somebody of a terrorist, to whether it's Atlanta or San Bernardino or the Boston bomber? Too many of these cases that have happened, whether you're talking about San Bernardino, Atlanta.
But I don't think you have to look any farther than the families that were of the Boston Marathon, in Atlanta, in San Bernardino, to ask if we can go further.
3 times. A White House mouthpiece later claimed Spicer meant the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. That's probably an important clarification since the last terrorist attack in Atlanta was Eric Rudolph's bombing of Centennial Olympic Park in 1996. For those who vaguely remember the name, Eric Rudolph was the white guy who was also credited with blowing up a women's health clinic, a lesbian nightclub, and, another women's health clinic. The latter attack killed a police officer and seriously injured a nurse. What you may have missed in this parade of Islamophobia, and well, if we're being incredibly generous, mistakes, was a trio of attacks that were stopped by law enforcement before anyone was hurt. Now, given the concern America has, where might these perpetrators have come from? Iraq, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Yemen? Were they radicalized by Al-Qaeda, ISIS? Nope, they're white Americans from the South. Mark Barnett, 48, from Ocala, Florida, allegedly planned on planting a bunch of bombs in Target retail stores in order to trigger a drop in their stock prices. This would, presumably, enable him to swoop in, buy up a bunch of stock, and wait for the retail giant to recover. Barnett is a registered sex offender, has previously been convicted of several felonies, including, quote, kidnapping, sexual battery with a weapon or force, and grand theft, end quote. There is no indication of his religious affiliation in any reports I've seen. I suspect that it's because he's not a Muslim. From Florida, we'll head over to South Carolina, where Benjamin McDowell, a convicted felon, tried to buy a gun from an undercover agent. Given that he was getting a Glock 40 plus ammo for a little over $100, he should have been suspicious. McDowell told the agent he planned on attacking a synagogue in the, quote, spirit of Dylann Roof, end quote. For those unfamiliar with Roof, he's the white supremacist that was convicted of shooting up a black church and killing 9 people in hopes of igniting a race war. We'll include links to a Guardian article that includes a variety of quotes from McDowell that explain his, quote, plans, end quote, such as they were. For fuck's sake, his mission got put on hold once before because his mother stopped letting him use her cell phone, and he had to borrow money from his grandfather for the firearm. His religious affiliation is sort of mentioned because he uses, badly, language associated with Christian identity white power groups. Then there's William Christopher Gibbs of Georgia, a 27-year-old member of the Church of Creativity, a white supremacy sect that claims, quote, race is our religion, end quote. He was hospitalized a few weeks ago after he feared exposure to ricin. How was he exposed to a lethal toxin that can kill an adult human? Well, some reports indicate he appears to have made it, although the FBI has not confirmed that, and Gibbs is currently under investigation. Some reports also indicate that Gibbs may be suffering from schizophrenia, but obviously for privacy reasons does not indicate if he's being treated. We hope that this incident does lead to adequate treatment and doesn't further stigmatize those dealing with mental illness. However, that consideration aside, these three would-be terrorists, and make no mistake, that's what they are, aren't getting mentions during rallies promoting an idiot-in-chief who claims to be concerned about national security. Their names aren't tumbling out of the gaping maws of either Conway or Spicer whenever they need a scapegoat, some sort of justification for the next ridiculous executive decree, because they don't fit their narrative. They aren't foreign-born immigrants sent here by radical Islam undercover to destroy our American way of life. They're homegrown radical Christians in plain sight who think they're promoting the American way of life. And they think they're the true Americans because they have the right skin color, belong to the right religion, and because the orange buffoon in the Oval Office, who is officially endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, has tacitly told them they are. Every lie Trump spewed about foreigners taking jobs, raping women, and voting illegally fueled their hate, gave them a target for their rage, told them it wasn't their fault they lived small, shitty lives, that they were two-bit thugs just taking up space. Yes, I said thugs. I know that word has become code for black nowadays, but its proper meaning is, quote, noun, a violent person, especially a criminal, end quote. And these guys fit that bill. Two of the three overtly planned attacks meant to wound or kill people, and the third was fucking around with ricin. What's the likely expectation for that activity? And let's add Roof to the mix. He was convicted of killing 9 people in a church. Way back in episode 7 or so, I mentioned Kurzman and Schanzer's law enforcement assessment of violent extremists. In case you forgot, it suggests that law enforcement has more to fear from right-wing white nationalists than it does Muslims. So instead of targeting refugees escaping war-torn countries and claiming they're bringing terrorism to the U.S., perhaps we should be paying closer attention to the terrorists that are already here.
The sleep of reason brings forth monsters.
I'm a whiner, and I keep whining and whining until I win.
Maybe somebody will rise up.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty.
Welcome to Swing State, an aggressive, progressive, critical, and political podcast from the middle of the Midwest.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Swing State. Thank you so much for joining us. It's hard for Lewayne and I to believe it has been 10 episodes already. We are 10 episodes deep into this little adventure of ours. We've been having a ball. We thank you all for listening to us, whoever's out there. If you'd like to follow us on Facebook, our Facebook page is facebook.com/SwingStateShow, or you can search it in Facebook at Swing State Show. Our Twitter handle is at SwingState_show. Well, it has been a busy week in politics. I was surprised at the topic that Lewayne chose, but in a pleased way, for our Broadside today. The interesting thing about living in America these days is you have a whole host of people who, how do we say this in a polite, general way? They're persuaded about a number of fundamental facts about the country and the things that are a threat to them in it that are simply not true. And to put a point on this, Lewayne, he wrote a fair bit about some of the real threats that you're facing, but just to piggyback a bit off of what he was saying and to mine one of his sources, the Triangle Center on Terrorism and Homeland Security released a survey or a study that they had done. I'm going to give you a little piece of it here, outlining the different kinds of terror terrorist threats that the country faces and law enforcement agencies' response to it. Lewayne has read from this before, but I feel like it's just necessary for everyone to hear this information because it's so crucial that you understand the practical facts of reality before you go about forming opinions on what you should be afraid of. So here are their key findings. Law enforcement agencies in the United States consider anti-government violent extremists, not radicalized Muslims, to be the most severe threat of political violence that they face. Further down in the document, they say these findings emerged from a survey we conducted with the Police Executive Research Forum in 2014 with funding from the National Institute of Justice. The sampling frame was all 480 state, county, and municipal law enforcement agencies with more than 200 sworn officers plus 63 additional county and municipal agencies with 200 or fewer sworn officers in selected jurisdictions that experienced an incident or prosecution for violent extremism in recent years. So that is where this information is coming from. What is the information? Anti-government violent extremism is the thing that concerns 73.8% of these agencies the most. The next one is Al-Qaeda-inspired violent extremism. I'm actually surprised how they got that high with that number. But you can see that the thing that they're most worried about ain't Muslims from overseas. It is people in our own country, homegrown extremists, who are listening to, well, I'm going to guess a pretty steady diet of right-wing talk radio, because that is where a lot of the anti-government craziness stems from. But if you were to listen to Donald Trump, for example, or anyone else in the conservative movement, you would immediately be met with figures who are almost beleaguered with a delusion that Muslims and Mexicans are the biggest threat to your personal security as an American citizen, when there is really no evidence to suggest that.
Oddly enough, when I was researching for the Broadside, something that didn't get included in it, because I basically discovered it after I had written it and recorded it, was an article in the Triad City Beat, which is, I believe, North Carolina newspaper, talking about, well, the headline is, quote, local conservative activists prepare for violent confrontation with Islam, end quote. And basically, this article outlines a meeting that they describe as a, quote, consortium of Tea Partiers, patriot groups, and other conservative activists gathered in a private dining room at a seafood restaurant in Kernsville, end quote. 20 or so people gathered together at a seafood joint talking about how they're going to fight radical Islam because they think that is the biggest threat to the United States. Some of the shit that they're talking about, it sort of stuns me that, one, they believe it, but two, the number of people who are talking about, quote, killing the hell, quote, out of Muslims, because they're concerned, oddly enough, not about Al-Qaeda or ISIS or other, quote, outwardly extremist groups, but Muslims who, quote, appear to be moderate and integrated into American society, end quote. In other words, what was once the red under the bed is now the brown under the bed. These people actually believe that the Muslim Brotherhood has somehow created a network of terrorists throughout the United States. One of them spent some time talking about Keith Ellison because, of course, he's Muslim.
Oh, yeah, he's a Muslim, so that obviously is just a big red flag there.
Yeah, they describe him as part of the, quote, stealth jihad, end quote. Quote, he's trying to assimilate others to the culture. That's what Keith Ellison is doing. That's why he didn't take an Arabic name, end quote. Now, here's my favorite part of this, because it shows you how informed these people are. Quote, an unidentified man in the audience chimed in, just as an aside, Keith Ellison's brother is the chair of the Forsyth County Democratic Party, end quote. The response is, it's here, it's in this town, end quote. These people are afraid of shit they don't know anything about, and it's because they've been told to be afraid.
And I think that this would be a perfect point for us to turn our discussion to something that has been in the news a lot lately for an interesting series of reasons, and that's this concept of hashtag fake news. I wake up every day now, when you read things like this, and it is a little bit discouraging. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody to get down about this issue. You fucking stand up straight. Am I tired? No, I'm not fucking tired. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fight these battles every fucking day. But it is a little bit discouraging when you see people who apparently have no fucking idea what the term means. And of course, the single person that I'm thinking of that has no fucking idea what the term fake news means is Donald Trump.
Well, he has an idea of what it means. What he means is shit that doesn't agree with him.
That literally what is happening now on the conservative right in America today is the term fake news, which is basically the 21st century equivalent of the Lügenpresse from Nazi Germany, the lying press. It's just any news story which is inconvenient or casts doubt or asks questions or basically says anything that you happen to not like.
Which, when you're a president like Trump, is going to be pretty much everything they fucking say. The problem for him is they're quoting him and specifically describing his actions. There's no fucking getting around it. If anything, the news has probably spent more time in the last 2 months being as factual as possible just for this reason. Because they know what's coming.
So if you think that we're being a little bit overboard with this, well, my first answer is you obviously haven't been paying any fucking attention. And my second answer is Donald J. Trump tweeted out the following on February 17th.
The fake news media, the failing at New York Times, at NBC News, at ABC, at CBS, at CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people.
The President of the United States just said that the Fourth Estate, the thing that is enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution...
It's in the first fucking amendment. Yeah. It's the first one. It's the one they thought was really fucking important, even ahead of the one about guns.
So they write the Constitution, and then they're like, this doesn't quite nail it. We need to get a few basic liberties in there. First Amendment, the press. The press. You can't go after the press. You can't stifle the press. You can't silence the press. And nor is it the enemy, as Donald Trump says, of the American people. In fact, a free, independent media is a bulwark of our liberty, without which our liberty would not exist. We need the press as much as we need the Constitution or government, frankly. The two cannot work independently without each other.
The only people for whom the media is the enemy are people who are doing shit they don't want you to know about.
Or as John McCain put it,
if you want to preserve democracy as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. Without it, I'm afraid that we would lose so much of our individual liberties over time. That's how dictators get started.
We are not the only ones to be bringing this up and noticing it. John McCain being the one you just heard. Also, a conservative author, the editor of The Atlantic, David Frum, was with Scott Stossel. And, well, we'll just let you listen to him for a little bit. The title of it is How Trump Could Build an Autocracy.
What do we call what the Trump administration represents at this point, based on what you've seen so far and based on what you wrote in the article?
The fancy term is authoritarian kleptocracy. The unfancy term is a banana republic. I was on a plane today seated beside a woman who actually, I was quite touched, was carrying a copy of the magazine. And she told me that on election night she'd been having dinner with friends of hers who were emigres from Turkey. And she was assuring them, well, you know, it's not going to be so bad. We've been here before. And they said, we've lived this. Let me tell you, it's going to be that bad. Get ready. I think one of the things that we need to bear in mind is Americans do not like to learn from the experiences of other countries. The idea of American exceptionalism means you never have to listen to anybody. But the developed countries are more and more alike. We share common experiences, and you can see the things that are happening that Donald Trump is moving towards, partly consciously, partly unconsciously. I don't think he's a strategic mastermind, but I do think he's somebody who's got a shrewd sense, especially after he's made a first mistake. He gets shrewder when he's made a mistake than he has before he starts. He's best on defense because the paranoia then becomes a source of strength and ingenuity for him. This is a trend that you see in places like Hungary, in places like Turkey, in places like the Philippines, in places like South Africa after Nelson Mandela. You have rulers who, they're not idealists. They're not filled with these demented projects of the Hitlers and the Maos and the Stalins. They just want to steal. But stealing in a modern bureaucratic state is difficult and dangerous. And you have to turn off the law step by step in order to steal. You have to turn off the free press in order to steal. And that's the risk we face. Other countries are farther down the road, and it's important to study their experience and learn from it, and especially from the Central Europeans who are in many ways in a situation most similar to ours.
One of the things that I've been proud of is that we here Swing State, we have been right on top of this authoritarian streak from our very first episode. This is something we've been talking about and warning about in a serious way. We're not even being very flippant when we say this. And the reasons is because there are plenty of both historical parallels to different things that have happened in different countries in history, but also the modern ones in places like Russia, how Vladimir Putin, for example, rose to power and shut down the law and the press in his own country. And one of the things that really concerns us, and me in particular, I guess, is that you have a large segment of the population who has been listening to Rush Limbaugh for the last 20, 30 years, and every day they have turned in to hear Rush say something like, "My friends, the liberal media is destroying the country. The drive-by media, the liberal media," and he's repeated this. And the right wing has repeated this, and repeated it, and repeated it. And now we find, in the year 2017, Donald Trump is trotting out the term fake news to refer to journalists, the same journalists that Rush Limbaugh heretofore referred to as the liberal media, when in fact the media isn't all that liberal, and they certainly aren't fake.
Well, no, I mean, I think most of the time what you'll find is, while reporters and staff maybe tend to be more liberal within the media, the guys at the top making the decisions still tend to be conservative. They will step on a story if they think it makes their guy look too bad.
And the really troubling thing about how Donald Trump is using the liberal media turned into fake news line is that he's not describing fake news. No. There is such a thing as fake news, ladies and gentlemen. It is real. In fact, according to a BuzzFeed article published on November 16th, 2016, towards the end of the election in the August through Election Day part of our timeline, fake news engagement on Facebook was up to 8.7 million. Mainstream news, their engagement count was about 7.3 million. To give you some concrete examples of these headlines, here are their top 5 fake election stories by Facebook engagement. So these are the top 5 stories that people were reading in the hundreds of thousands and sharing and passing around. This formed a very large part of conservative thought about the election. Number 1, Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president. Releases statement by a reputable organization called Ending the Fed. The next one, number 2, WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS, then drops another bombshell. Breaking news, The Political Insider. 3, it's over. Hillary's ISIS email just leaked and it's worse than anyone could have imagined. 4, just read the law. Hillary is disqualified from holding any federal office. 5, FBI agents suspected in Hillary email links found dead in apparent murder-suicide.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
From the Denver Guardian. 567,000 people engaged. I'm guessing unique visitors engaged with this.
First of all, how do you hear most of those headlines and not at least pause like, wait, really? Are you fucking kidding me? Because, really? The fucking Democratic candidate is going to be running guns for ISIS? I mean, that doesn't cause you to at least pause for a second and go, just a second. Now, the number one, the one you were talking about, the FBI agent getting whacked, that doesn't surprise me that that's huge, because since basically the Clintons were in office the first time, there's this constant narrative of all the dead people associated with them, which goes back to Limbaugh and all of the other mouthpieces back then.
I think Michael Moore gave the greatest argument about that one, which is if Hillary Clinton has actually killed all of the people that she's rumored to have killed, that is all the more reason to vote for her, because she is the most badass stealth assassin in the history of American politics.
I keep coming back to Pizzagate because that was the one that sort of, I was like, how the fuck do you even get to that point? That one, you would hear that Hillary did, I don't know, fill in the fucking blank, pretty much anything. And somehow just this one weird-ass news outlet happens to get the story. I mean, in that case, I think it was, what, Alice Jones? Okay, so big mouthpiece. But a lot of these headlines eventually were revealed to be sourced from, oh, surprise, Russia.
A very sophisticated operation that took a lot of manpower. This wasn't one fat guy. This was a coordinated effort by the Russian government to inundate Facebook and conservative channels with this shit.
The problem is the people who are most inclined to believe it, of course, believed it. And the people that were on the fence heard it, and if you hear it enough, it becomes real.
Or the burden becomes on you to prove that it's not true, which again is it's the problem with the fake news mantra to begin with, is it flips the burden of proof. It is actually Donald Trump's job now to discredit through facts the New York Times, CBS, NBC, whoever he's pissed off at today.
And I know this is a problem for some Trump followers. The rules of logic and debate and argument sort of put the burden of proof on the person making the extraordinary claim. In his case, his extraordinary claim is all of these stories are bullshit. The problem is, because of incidents like what AJ was talking about just a minute ago leading up to the campaign, the news outlets, legitimate news outlets now, are really, really fucking careful about what they're saying for that reason. They don't want to give anybody any reason to discredit what they're saying. Luckily for them, they can mostly get by quoting Trump's actual fucking words and documenting his actions. They're dealing with literal facts. And somehow that's fake news. And we all know why. It's because he doesn't like what they're saying, which is he's a fucking idiot, he's incompetent, he's dangerous, and he really is risking destroying the nation. Not in some oblique sense like the Muslim Obama was going to destroy America or Hillary was going to destroy America. First of all, I don't know why the fuck anybody comes into the presidency in order to destroy a fucking country.
Yeah,
that doesn't make any fucking sense.
There are easier roads than that.
Right. But you can come into it like Trump did and do it incidentally. It's not his goal. I can't imagine his goal is to destroy America because he lives here, he makes money here, he has his shit here. He's not going to intentionally destroy the country. I just think that if there's any risk in that, it's going to be because he fucking does it by accident, which we've already talked about before. His goal, as near as we can really tell, is the same goal he's always had, which is to make as much fucking money as possible and make himself look as good as fucking possible. The problem is he doesn't have a PR group doing commercials for The Fucking Apprentice for him now. He has the actual news media watching everything he does and going, dude, you're fucking stupid.
And he sits around watching the same networks that he considers to be fake news, which is just incredible. But to me, this is dangerous because you have a group of people who have spent most of their lives listening to people like Rush Limbaugh or people like Fox News, certain people on Fox News. I don't want to, I'm not going to throw Shepard Smith and Chris Wallace out with the bathwater, so to speak, but you have people who are willing to believe that anything that does not come from a conservative talk radio host is somehow suspicious or fraudulent or liberal, which is just hysterical. To think that the major news networks represent liberalism or progressivism, I don't even know what to say to a claim like that. But now you have a president co-opting something that is real, fake news, and instead morphing the term to simply mean that which he doesn't like, and then his followers are willing to swallow that without any hesitation.
Uncritically, no question.
Yeah, uncritically. That's 67 million people or so?
A shitload.
Yeah, a shitload of people. However many people voted for him, about that many millions of people are willing to believe that the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, etc. are fake news.
Yeah, they don't know anything.
But their Facebook feed with the memes and such, that is reliable.
One of the phrases I kept hearing as we went into the election was this fucking echo chamber thing. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept, it's basically that you put yourself within a place in which all the media and everybody you interact with and everything sort of agrees with what you're saying. And it just sort of regurgitates and echoes what you're saying. One of the side effects of getting most of your information from something like Facebook is that it sort of self-selects an echo chamber because their algorithms keep track of what it is that you pay attention to, what you don't pay attention to, and tend to throw shit your way that sort of supports what you're saying, which means that the only time you get any variation from that is when you somehow are associated with somebody who opposes that idea and throws you a meme or throws you an article or whatever. The problem is, of course, when you get that, you just assume it's fake news and disregard it.
It's basically an elaborate way of constructing a confirmation bias apparatus for yourself.
Yeah.
So how do you counter that? Well, you do kind of what Lewayne and I do. I read press from not just America, but from other countries if I want to learn about America's actions in the world. You know, you should include the BBC and Der Spiegel and Al Jazeera and French newspapers and different, Spanish language newspapers. In America, you have a whole buffet of media options you can choose from. And frankly, I am not nearly as down on the state of media or journalism as some people seem to be. I think, if anything, we're living in a golden age of potential for journalism because of the money and resources that are available in crowdsourcing and such. There are steps that you ought to take to make sure that you are not living in an echo chamber that I don't think many conservatives and well, frankly, many liberals do bother to take, because in a way it's human nature. Confirmation bias, it is a human characteristic that we all share.
Accepting the information one gets via confirmation bias is easy. It takes some effort to decide that I'm going to go read what Reuters has to say. I'm going to go read what Al Jazeera has to say. In order to do this show and to be informed, I have to read publications that are grossly biased to the right, but I have to know what they're saying, and I have to be able to argue what they're talking about. I can't be blindsided, but I have to know what's going on. In order to do that, I have to read shit I really don't want to read.
The reason you do is because it's intellectually honest.
Yes.
Which is the exact opposite of what Trump is, a pathological liar.
Right.
Who simply, because he can't handle reality, he has to dub anything that is offensive to him or that he disagrees with as fake news. Co-opting a term that actually does have a literal meaning and changing it. Again, that's part of Trump's, they say, the power of language that he has. Well, he doesn't have the power you don't give him, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
The news that you're getting from the New York Times and the Washington Post, it may end up that the sources don't pan out. They may make errors that they will, of course, retract and print a fucking retraction. When has Trump ever done that? But it's not fake news. It's real news. Hashtag real news. Spread that around.
It's always possible to make mistakes. It is always possible that a reporter will be overzealous about something. Yes, but here's the deal with that. It gets caught, okay? Legitimate newspapers will, when that's revealed, as AJ pointed out, will print corrections. And in some cases, will literally get rid of the reporter. Legitimate media does not allow you to do essentially what Trump does and just get up there and lie without there being consequences. It has to be dealt with. It's why many of his mouthpieces are no longer allowed to appear on various chat shows, because there's no legitimacy to what they're saying. They have so damaged their credibility, they're not even allowed to appear on a show because it actually hurts the credibility of the show they're appearing on. And that's the difference between the fake news and the real media.
So if you want to do something this week that is helpful to the country, find a newspaper, a real newspaper, whether it's the Washington Post, the New York Times, our local Des Moines Register, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, whatever it is, subscribe.
Yes.
Support real journalism.
Please.
Support real journalists who are doing real investigative reporting. And oftentimes these people do these investigations overseas at risk to their own lives.
Yes.
Support real journalists doing real work. Their sources are risking a lot too. So support them in their ability to get the truth to the American people, even though it seems like at times we are being drowned by Facebook bullshit. Guys, it really, really, really does matter that these institutions hold. In fact, if there's one thing that we need to survive the Trumpocalypse, it's an independent, real media with real reporters doing hashtag real news.
We feel that this is a fair bill.
These changes are pretty much of gutting of the 4 major chapters of the Iowa Code that involve labor.
So the only thing we heard is a little tweaking here on the health insurance and the arbitration. Well, the tweak turned into a torque.
If this legislation goes through, we will be Wisconsin. And I simply don't want that to happen.
It is not a minor tinkering. The only thing they're left to bargain about is base wages.
And for a little bit of local flavor today, things are not going very well in the old state of Iowa these days. Under enormous protests, the Republican House and Senate rammed through a collective bargaining bill which will no longer allow certain sectors of the employed population to bargain for certain things if they're in a union. This is in lockstep with Republican efforts across the nation, both in modern times and historically over the last 30, 40 years, to crush unionization, to crush workers' rights, to interfere with any effort on the part of organized labor to secure better benefits for workers when it affects the employer's bottom line. And Iowa is, of course, at the same time, a huge state for tax cuts for giant corporations, too. That's the Brandstad ethos.
The thing I don't understand about the right's attack on unionization is, well, actually, I do understand what it is. It's to, as AJ pointed out, to help the bottom line of the companies. But the thing I guess I don't understand is why Republicans as a group, Republican voters, think this is a great fucking idea, because it's their jobs the unions are trying to protect. It's their income. It's their safety. It's their lives the unions are trying to protect. And when you get rid of unions, when you get rid of oversight, when you get rid of regulations, which has become the Republican way of doing business, people's lives are put at risk for the bottom dollar of the company that they work for. And I don't understand why anyone, regardless of party, would vote for something like that, would support something like that. I sure as hell don't want to go to a workplace that I know is unsafe because nobody gives a shit about me anymore. I don't want to continually lose wages because my boss decides, you know what, we're not making enough money. We're going to have to start cutting somebody's wages. And it's always going to be at the bottom, as opposed to the guys at the top who do things like get bonuses for showing up in the office on a given day.
Well, if you're not liking what Republicans are doing on collective bargaining, they are not done yet. The Iowa GOP is just getting warmed up in its crusade of idiocy. Coming from Iowa Starting Line, an article by Pat Reinard published on February 20th, we have a new bill that is coming down the Iowa Senate called Senate File 288. This bill is a bill that pertains to party affiliation in universities. I'll just give you a little bit of a sample of it. The subsection 39, it requires partisan balance of faculty employed at each of the institutions of higher learning governed by the board. A person shall not be hired as a professor or instructor member of the faculty at such an institution if the person's political party affiliation on the date of hire would cause the percentage of the faculty belonging to one political party to exceed by 10% the percentage of the faculty belonging to the other political party. Yes, you just heard that right. This is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard in my life. To start with, the two-party system in the United States is not official. Okay, it's just a historical happenstance, really based on the way the Senate works. But there is nothing that necessitates that you only have two parties. So does the Green Party and the Constitution Party and the Labor Party or the Democratic Socialists, do they have to be hired to a certain percentage of their representation in the public or in Iowa?
It would sort of require you to have some understanding of their political spectrum of those parties. I mean, it's easy when you're talking Democrat, Republican. It tends to be, liberal, conservative. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, whatever those fucking terms actually mean. But yeah, you bring in the Green Party. What does that mean? What about the Democratic Socialists, the fucking anarchists? What do any of those things mean? What if you don't have a fucking party because you think parties as a whole are kind of a stupid idea? Like, I don't know, me. I think in the legislation, the bill you were looking at, it says if you have no party affiliation, you basically don't factor into the calculations either way. Well, then why the fuck wouldn't anybody just decide, I don't belong to any fucking party?
The implementation is insane. The concept itself is insane. How is this not just a form of affirmative action? You're mandating that a certain number of the faculty be conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat.
So like quotas.
Yeah, like a quota. So we've got a quota we have to meet. Well, we've got 15 liberal professors and we've got 17 conservative professors. So I guess we need a couple more liberals or another liberal.
Well, okay. But again, doesn't it sort of depend on the field? I mean, if you're talking about history, I can see how, maybe your political slant may have some impact on what you teach. But fucking physics? The fuck difference does it make what your party affiliation is?
And forget the fucking slant. You're just talking literally about the registration on the card,
right,
which is changeable. This seems to me to be, in addition to idiotic, non-enforceable on a certain level.
And frankly, if you could enforce it, it seems weird to me that the small government party is the one who wants to implement a plan that requires you, one, to reveal your fucking political affiliation,
right,
and two, to require a constant update on that, because that's also mentioned there within the bill in terms of the implementation, that they will get yearly updates as to what your fucking affiliation is. First of all, who the fuck's paying for that? Because it has to be submitted free of charge. Well, that's fine, but compiling that shit is not free of charge for whoever's having to do it.
No, and I mean, and what are you going to do if somebody objects, or they want to appeal the decision, or they weren't hired because it says my political affiliation is this, but actually it's this, but I voted in the last election is this.
Here's the thing. I have been Republican. I have been Democrat. I am now not affiliated with either party. Now, again, I wouldn't fit into the calculations, but why the fuck should anybody else fit into those calculations? That's the thing that sort of floors me, because ultimately what this is designed to do, and let's make no mistake about it, it is designed to essentially reduce those evil fucking ivory tower liberals in place of those manly, real American conservatives. To some degree, this shit is sort of self-selecting. If you're really a hardcore conservative, are you gonna want to go to one of these liberal colleges to work?
No, because being a really hardcore conservative usually is correlated with low education level.
It's not an environment that's going to be amenable to them doing that.
The GOP is now infamous for creating solutions to problems that don't exist. And in the state of Iowa, we've got collective bargaining, we've got the assault on the university now, and we can also probably look at some voter ID issues coming up here. So we have plenty of reasons to be beleaguered, but Lewayne and I are still pretty optimistic about things in general. 2018 is just a few short years away. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen,
organize, mobilize, protest,
vote.